All right, so next up, we've got Haley and I are going to be having a fireside chat. For those who don't know me, I'm Abby. I'm with LDV. I come from a 10-year track record of implementing strategies to improve operational performance of companies across 4 different continents. I joined LDV in 2017, and as Evan mentioned earlier, I was recently promoted to partner. And one of my first emails, actually, after being promoted to partner, was from Haley and the All Raise crew. So Haley is a partner at First Round Capital. She's based in New York like we are. And prior to joining First Round, she'd co-founded and scaled Birchbox, the leading beauty and grooming retailer that was seed funded by First Round in 2010. Since joining First Round in 2016, Haley's led investments across many industries and business models, including healthcare, consumer, tech-enabled hardware, marketplaces, and many others. In her portfolio, she's got companies like Mirror, Caper, Alma, 30 Madison, Clare, Studs, Anvyl, Crowd Justice, and so many more. Haley, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Abby, and congratulations again on the promotion. Such good news for LDV and New York Tech.
Thanks so much. It's really a pleasure to be joining such a fantastic cohort of female partners in the New York area. So I wanted to kind of just kick off our chat with talking a little bit about your investment focus at First Round and just putting out there what stages and sectors you're most interested in these days.
Yep. So First Round is a generalist seed stage focused firm. We're US only. Seed stage is defined broadly these days. So that's everything from $1 million pre-seed to these $7 million, like we call them mango seed rounds that are happening in today's market. We lead those and take a very active role with our portfolio companies post-investment. So we, as your great intro and bio alluded to, I really invest across different sectors, but there's a few trends that I'm especially interested in these days. One being the future of local commerce and how small and medium businesses emerge post-pandemic, and then continue to have a lot of interest in health and wellness and the consumerization of healthcare.
Fascinating. So before you joined Birchbox, or before you joined First Round, you were actually the co-CEO at Birchbox. And so you took it from launch to over 1 million monthly subscribers and you raised 70 million in capital. Could you give us kind of like your why behind that before we get into like some of your bigger focus on local consumer at the moment?
I love that question of the why, because honestly, I ask that of a lot of founders when I'm hearing their
I may have checked that out in your bio.
So my original why for Birchbox was really a personal pain point. I had trouble discovering the right products for me and basically opted out of high-end beauty. I think the why shifted over time. So it went from a personal pain point to Katya, my co-founder, and I developing what I thought was just like a beautiful business model that needed to exist. So it was the concept that then became my why. As we launched it, seeing the impact that we were having for our stakeholders, so the consumers that were subscribing and the beauty brands that were finding us to be a very effective channel for them to find new customers for their products, like that became my motivation. And then towards the end of my operating tenure, like I was jumping out of bed in the morning because of the employees at Birchbox and like the faith that they had put in me, that they were building their careers at Birchbox felt like just such a responsibility and a privilege. So it evolved over time.
That's so nice. People are the core of everything that we do from an investing side of things, and also obviously like so core to any company and how well they perform and how they can grow. But kind of going back to this idea about business model, you guys founded this idea of what is now like consumer subscription kits. Was this originally how you started out, or how did you kind of land on this idea of boxing things up and sending it out to people as a subscription service?
Yeah, it's wild to me that now there's a market defined as like consumer subscription kits, because that definitely wasn't the case when we came up with the idea for Birchbox in 2009, 11 years ago, and launched it in 2010. It really was driven from us seeing that like the beauty industry was having trouble getting online. Consumers were being overwhelmed by choice. And we designed the business model from the ground up with like jobs to be done. Like we were such business school students. We had actually taken like Christensen's class on disruptive innovation. Like we were really just thinking about supply side innovation, demand side innovation, and how to fix a problem. But I think there was something in how we did it that was just so easily understood and super effective that inspired a lot of others to think, how else could this be applied? And whether it's through for replenishment or for discovery, it's just fascinating to see all the thousands of businesses that exist that have been inspired, I guess, by the business model that
I think when I was researching it, it looks like there's like $15 billion market now in the subscription box industry, according to McKinsey. So, like there is just so much, and you guys were at really the forefront of it. Was it hard to pitch investors on this new model? Because I'm assuming it's nothing that they had seen, or did it automatically make sense to them? Did it click when you started to talk to them?
It was tough. It was tough for us to pitch, first of all, because we had no idea what we were doing. We basically had a busted seed round before we ended up figuring it out, refining the pitch, and becoming more confident in having those conversations, and ultimately raising money from first round in our seed. But like it took some mistakes along the way. And I think the first thing was that like we talked to some of the wrong investors. We thought, oh, if someone's an angel investor or a seed investor, like they'll invest in our seed stage company, not realizing that we had to really narrow in on people who weren't scared of physical product, the fact that we were touching inventory. The right people to pitch also understood the massive opportunity in beauty as a, I guess when I was pitching it, it's probably grown a lot, but a $40 billion global market. And we were talking to people that's like only investing in software or only think about enterprise SaaS. So we really had to find the right people who understood the opportunity and were excited about how we were going after it.
That is such a great point, right? That to make sure as an entrepreneur that you're focused in on the investors who are going to be the most interested in you, because it makes so much of a difference if you go in understanding like exactly what they like to look at and what they like to talk about, so that they're on the same page and they can bring value to you too, right?
Yeah, but the frustrating thing, Abby, was the number of investors who said yes to meeting us and like took up our time, like evaluating it, who I think they were just sort of intrigued. It's too bad, but we were kind of like an oddity or a curiosity at the time, because there weren't that many all female teams raising VC.
Fascinating. Do you think that going out there, not only with this new business model, but as like an all-female team, do you think that this has given you a unique lens when you're hearing pitches at the other side of the table now, right? Like understanding that there were so many people who are kind of wasting your time. Do you try to do your best to make sure that you don't waste entrepreneurs' time? And then like, what do you bring to the table in those first meetings?
I'm worried that there's like someone in the audience that's like, Hayley wasted my time.
I highly doubt it, but
I hope so. I mean, I think we all as investors bring our life experiences as a unique lens to how we run our investment decision processes and what we look for in founders. I think I am more open-minded about where new ideas can come from and who they could come from because of my own experience. Like Katya, my co-founder, and I were outsiders to the beauty industry. We were first-time founders. And we really figured it out. So I think like I actually seek out those type of founders, whether it's, outsiders or people who might not be the standard archetype of a tech founder in the work that I do at First Round.
Interesting, because there is a lot of, kind of stigma around it in the venture space. And I've seen two kinds of thinkers, right? The ones who are like, well, we want somebody who has deep industry knowledge and connections, right? And I think that that's super valuable when you're trying to do something like maybe sell into big enterprise or something along those lines. But then you also get the people who are like, well, I want the disruptive thinker, somebody who comes from outside and brings an outsider's perspective and objective viewpoint. And so it's nice to see that, like, you kind of sit on that side of things where you're looking for the outside.
Yeah, no, I think there still needs to be a good answer for like, why them? Like, what is their unique perspective? I think it's easier to be contrarian and have believe that something that had never been done before can be done if you are coming from outside the industry. But I think there still needs to be an answer for why you.
Why you, for sure. And making sure that you're answering that right up front and center. You wrote on your first round bio that you never actually wanted to become a VC, and you still haven't changed your mind about it. So what is it exactly that you have against venture as a whole?
So I wrote that 5 years ago. So clearly I stuck with it. But I think it's pretty simple. Like, it's the founders that are the heroes and doing the value creation in this ecosystem. And so it's not that venture is an enabling force, but it is the founders and the operators that are doing the hard work in my mind.
So after being a VC for 4 years now, is it any different than you thought it was? Or is this idea that, the founders do all the hard work, still kind of who you were at the beginning and what you believe in now?
Yeah, I think that hasn't changed. I think it's just been reinforced. But I think, there were no huge surprises as I made the transition. But I think it's just been really, what I've seen is just as much as being an operator, I think helps me be a better investor. The jobs are just so different. The way that I organize my days, the way that I add value, it's a totally different ball of wax.
Can you give me an example?
It's taken a lot of adjustment, I think.
What's one thing that you always did as a founder that you never do now as an investor?
Oh, I measured everything obsessively on really short feedback cycles. And that's what I loved about running an e-commerce business is test, measure, iterate, experiment. And what I love about working at First Round is we do have that mentality, but it is on if you're lucky, a quarterly basis that you're able to go through that process. So, I kind of got laughed out of the room in my first few months at First Round when I was like, I'm going to create an activity dashboard with metrics. And I was like, if you're going to be staring at that every day, you're not going to be doing the most important work, which is, the way that I define it for myself now is add value, hopefully, in every interaction that you choose to have, whether it's with other investors or founders. And it's a lot about where you choose to spend your time, or as one of my partners put it last week, our business is all about inputs and outputs. So it's squishier.
So, when we were talking a little bit earlier about transitioning into the title of partner, and the piece of advice that you offered me was to stay true to myself, my values and perspectives, and not to take things too seriously, right? And, as, coming in and your partners are laughing at you about bringing these metrics to the table and instead telling you to focus elsewhere. It's hard because so often we do try to emulate those around us and adapt their styles, especially when you've got, people like Josh and Howard, who are incredibly successful partners at First Round. But, in your mind, what is something that you bring to the table that's differentiated from them, that allows you to keep it fun when you're evaluating companies and keep your own personal touch on everything that you do?
Yeah. So I think what I remind myself is that I was hired to join the team as a GP, not to stamp out the same approach and same decision-making that First Round would have been doing if I wasn't in the room. And that to me means, whether in terms of approach or decision-making, we have pushed ourselves to be a little bit more structured and metrics driven than maybe if I wasn't around, being we should measure things, or always asking, what's the definition of success here? Because it's amazing being able to join a platform that Josh and Howard created, and we get so much from that. But I had fresh eyes and was able to point things out along the way that I think has enabled us to evolve in what I believe is a good direction. And that is also in terms of sectors and investments as well. So things like, investments that we've made in fertility as a sector, or a more recent investment in a piercing company serving Gen Z kids. Like maybe Howard would have been interested in that, but I think it comes from, you know, my interests and perspective just as an individual, and I think I'm adding the best value when I push us a little bit beyond what we would have done otherwise.
That's great. You know, it's so interesting. The fertility sector is actually something that keeps coming up with us and in healthcare.
Oh yes, applying vision to embryo selection is something that I've heard
and it's really fascinating, right? Because all of the practitioners that we talk to just keep calling it like the Wild West, right, of healthcare at the moment.
It's amazing. It's you know, because of regulatory changes, I guess like 10 years ago, what used to just be applied to infertility has now been shifted to proactive fertility, and women who are much earlier in their like reproductive journey can be making the choice to do egg freezing and family planning in a way that's different than, you know, the generation before us, or even women just, you know, 10 years older than us. And so the market has grown amazingly. I'm hoping the financial structure also changes because it's still quite expensive.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, kind of talking about some of the investments that you have made with First Round, a lot of these are powered by visual technologies, whether that's Mirror, Caper, Squad, Papaya Payments, and so many more. Were there some critical points that these teams brought up when they spoke to you that led you to invest in them at such an early stage?
Yeah, it's interesting. I like wouldn't have seen that theme of like visual technology applying to many of the companies that I invested in had you not pointed it out. And I think it's interesting now to reflect on it. But honestly, I think, you know, we invest quite early. I think all of those companies were, well, I think that it ranges, but we're often investing pre-revenue, sometimes even pre-product. So the biggest factor in our decision is very much the team. The founder, what they're able to convey about how they see the market, how they see it evolving, and the choices that they've made about the product thus far. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I say thus far is because we really do expect it to evolve from the point that we're leading a seed round to, you know, the product coming to market, and it of course evolves over time. So it's really team-driven decisions.
That's great. Yeah, that actually it leads me to like one of the questions that I had for you in terms of, you know, you really got in front of like the big at-home fitness trend that's obviously been accelerated because of the pandemic with your investment in Mirror. It sold last June to Lululemon for what, upwards of 500 million or so. Mirror was one of the first cool fitness specific video screens, but now it leverages cameras to do in-home personal training and coaches. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when you first met Bryn Putnam, who's the CEO, and heard her pitch, you know, what did you think, and how different was the pitch then than what Mirror is today? How have they iterated?
It is eerily like similar. I was actually
I picked a bad one.
If you would define a mirror as a visual technology, right? Like that's maybe like the first visual technology there was like something that refracts light to show you your image.
Exactly.
But no, the camera was built in and part of the pitch from the beginning. There was always the idea of it being like an open platform for lots of different types of content and for the ability of one-to-one interaction and additional sensors besides the camera. So, you know, heart rate sensors, etc. But Bryn is such a product visionary. And the smart thing that she did, and I suggest this to hardware founders, is, you know, she had to raise a lot of money before she got to market. We were part of, I think, a $5 million seed round. There were 2 more rounds before she even launched. Wow. And she was able to get us so excited about investing that early, 2 years before the product. She sold the first product because she built a pretty hacky but effective prototype to help us understand what the consumer experience would be. So I went a few blocks away from my home to the fitness studio that she owned, where she had rigged like a TV screen behind a mirror and had a like non-dynamic video looping that would show what the interaction would be like and helped it come to life. Because I think, in the investment decision, we were basically like, if this is the magical experience that we believe it to be, then this is going to be great. And she helped bring us along with that, as opposed to just being like, oh, trust us, it's going to be awesome. Wait 2 years, I'm going to build it soon.
That's great. It kind of goes to one of the things that you always hear people say, which is hardware is hard, right?
Oh yeah.
And to get it off the ground. And so anything that you can do as a hardware entrepreneur to showcase the fact that like you can get this working and the pieces are all there, is always super helpful for us to be able to see, right?
Yeah, we almost didn't do it because of some like scar tissue within the firm around other hardware investments that had taken too long or cost too much, and got to market too late with outdated product. But I think what Bryn did that was smart also is just leverage existing components. Like she wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel; she was just trying to bring them together in a way that was, the whole was bigger than the sum of the parts.
Yep, absolutely. Are there any other consumer trends that you're really looking at these days that are impacted by visual technologies?
When it comes to visual technologies, I mean, I think I'm just like continually surprised by the range of pitches and sectors where I see it being applied. So just yesterday, there was a company that was using the camera to measure biofeedback, like putting your finger behind the camera and being able to get pulse through that. I think increasing application to shopping, like I think a lot about the future of retail. And as I said, local commerce too. And like, who knows if QR codes are gonna like really change anything, but it is fascinating to see, at least in New York, how like everyone now has figured them out because that is how you read the menus at restaurants. But, I think with consumer a lot, it comes back to how a product or a technology makes you feel. Or the value that it delivers. And I think visual technologies have a great potential to save you time. So we see that with Papaya, the payments company in our portfolio, like snap a picture of your parking ticket or your doctor's bill and they will pay it for you. Like save time. Amazing. That thing in your pocket can do it for you.
Our most precious
but in terms of how like making it you feel good, I think the visual technologies have the opportunity to do that too. Whether it's this biofeedback company that helps you regulate how you're breathing, or some of what you were seeing with filters and how you like present yourself to the world. I mean, don't we all feel good after seeing that?
Kill me, but I almost came in as a cat and said, "I am not a cat. I am human."
I mean, didn't that video make us all feel good?
Oh my gosh, it was such a great comic relief. But talking about the pandemic and some of the ways in which it has affected consumer, right? Like there's been such divergent results. Some of your investments have been in like the hardest hit spaces, right? But they're still flourishing because they were strategically positioned. One of the ones that I was looking at was like Madison Reed that you invested in as an angel or you sit on as independently. It really took off over the past year because nobody wants to go into salons, right? Collective retreats in the travel industry, which has taken such a huge hit. But since it's all about the outdoors and outdoor experiences, it hasn't had such an awful hit as most of the traditional hotels and resorts. So I'm assuming that you didn't forecast that a global pandemic was coming. But in retrospect, what do you think is one of the things that made them really resilient during these tough times?
That's it. So it's so interesting you point that out. I don't think that was like foresight that a global pandemic was coming at all. I think with those companies, like, again, I'm going to circle back to the founder, like Amy at Madison Reed has built an amazing omni-channel experience, including visual technology in terms of choosing like color matching the right hair dye
for your hair. To turn myself blonde when I was doing the research for this.
But she invested a lot in building an omni-channel foundation such that when all salons closed down, their .com business was able to really grow astronomically. And as people are ready to go back to salons, she has a growing salon business as well. She's also working with wholesalers like Ulta. So I think just the orientation to being where the consumer needs you to be and not being tied to any single channel, I think is what positioned her well there. And then I think like the collective retreats investment, like partly was driven by my interest in health and wellness. And I know it's weird to like connect hospitality to health, but when I invested in 2017 in that business, like I saw in consumers a need to like detox from digital and a need to like reconnect with nature
these days, right? Like after being locked inside for so long with like all of the stressors, dealing with kids and work and everything else, right? The ability to go outside and like take a break, or even to be able to just like go to a nice hotel and like sleep in a hotel bed, like that would be glorious.
Totally. So I think like we were seeing, the pandemic's just made a lot of things more acute that were already there underneath the surface.
For sure. Is there, a way in which this pandemic is going to impact how you evaluate teams that come across your doorstep from here forward?
Um, I don't know if it's the pandemic specifically, but I think the last year has really showed me how founders need to like really show up for their teams more broadly than just like running the business. Like I think CEOs and founders have had to support their teams through a lot of like personal and emotional stuff in 2020, whether it's adjusting to a pandemic, homeschooling your kids. What was it like for CEOs to be leading as the Capitol was being stormed? And the obligation that they have to make political statements and be clear about their values when it comes to things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that was always part of what I looked for in a good leader. But I think the last year has taught me it's even more important for us to be doing our founder references and thinking about the value system of founders in addition to their like capitalistic product choices as well.
Absolutely. If you had to give a piece of advice to a first-time entrepreneur who is starting out building their business under these circumstances, right? What advice would you give them? Would you say absolutely make sure that you have a diverse board behind you? Would you say, figure out ways in which you can be resilient in times of crisis? What would you say?
Well, assuming that I'm talking to like super early stage founders, I think I would just encourage them based on my own experience where I built a business out of a recession, that I think times like this where there's a lot of resorting of behavior and resorting of how people are spending their time, whether it's businesses or individuals, isn't just an amazing time to be building. And it's a chance for upstarts and startups to really gain ground compared to incumbents. And so like now is a fantastic time to be building.
Yeah. One of the questions that I always like to ask other investors was, what is the most difficult situation that you've been in over your past years at First Round?
That's super interesting question. I mean, I think this is maybe a cop out, but one of the biggest issues that I had transitioning from operator to investor was, at my core, I am a problem solver. And I love to like take a difficult situation and like help break it down, work with a team to figure out a solution. But most of my time now is meeting with founders who are looking for money, where their problem is that they need money and I can't solve that problem for them. And so I think that's like just a difficult situation that I put myself in this role, that I just really don't like saying no 99% of the time, like we are obligated to do. So that's something that I have to live with.
Okay, so if you had to pick one visual technology that you are most excited about coming to fruition over the next 20 years, which one would it be?
Oh my God, I want to know your answer. You go first.
There's too many to pick from. I can't choose one. That's why I made you choose one.
Coming to fruition. I don't know. I guess I'll like go to my stereotypical like consumer viewpoint, but like I think what computer vision can do and the fact that the cameras are in our pocket was like, I think it's already come to fruition, but I'm just excited to see new applications of it.
For sure. Well, Hayley, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to chat about all of the amazing things that you're doing at First Round, your experience from going from founder to funder, and really look forward to continuing the conversation together. Hope you can stick around a little bit more because there's a bunch of different things coming into the chat that maybe you'll be able to talk to offline with people. But it's really been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Thanks, everyone.